Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the online public meeting for the McCraney Creek Bridge Replacement Environmental Assessment Study. My name is Syed Rizvi, and I'm the project manager and point of contact from town for this study. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that Oakville is rich in the history and the modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis, from the lands of Anishinaabe to the Adawandaran and to Haudenosaunee and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in indigenous history, and we gather today on these treaty lands. We are in solidarity with indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions: lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations for being stewards for this traditional territory. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Phoebe Fee, Commissioner Community Infrastructure, and Eric Chen, Manager Transportation Planning. We have David Sinke and his team of consultants on this project from Wood Consulting. Tonight, we are hopeful that from Ward 2, Councillor Derek and Councillor Chisholm will join us soon. The purpose of today's meeting is to introduce the study project, provide update on the work completed so far, and get your feedback and answer any questions related to this project. Before I ask David to start his presentation, I'd like to mention that the recording of today's meeting and questions and answers will be posted on the study web page in next few days. At the end of the presentation, there will be question and answer session. You can type your questions in the Zoom chat box. In case we are unable to answer all the questions tonight, there's an electronic form available at the bottom of the study website. You can post your questions or comments through that form or send us to the email addresses or project team members provided at one of the presentation slides. With this brief introduction, I would now ask David to go over the presentation slides.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful, warm summer evening. I'm David Sinke with Wood. I'm going to step through the first several slides of this presentation. Mir Talpur, also with Wood, will then take the middle section and I'll wrap it up. And as Syed mentioned, there will be an opportunity for questions presented through the chat forum. Welcome again, and this presentation is for the McCraney Creek Bridge replacement. It's being, the class environmental assessment study is being completed in accordance with the Schedule B Municipal Class EA process. What we want to cover tonight goes through a background and current study, existing conditions and problem statement, alternative solutions, and next steps. So in terms of background and current study, we'll discuss the background, current study components, the process, and the work completed for the study. In terms of existing conditions, we'll look at the McCraney Creek Bridge existing conditions, existing conditions in other areas of study, including fluvial geomorphology, natural environment, stormwater management, flooding, and cultural environment. We'll define a problem statement for the study. And then we'll look at alternative solutions. We'll identify several alternative solutions. We'll look at the proposed preferred design for the bridge structure, and we'll also discuss climate change considerations for the project. So in terms of background, Council direction in July 2021, Council directed staff to terminate a class environmental assessment for Lakeshore Road West that was being completed, directed town staff to proceed with a separate Class EA for the McCraney Creek Bridge replacement using information, analysis, and design from the Lakeshore Road West study. So in particular, the minutes of that meeting stated that staff be directed to prepare a separate EA for the McCraney Creek Bridge improvements and file on the public record for a 30-day review period. So in terms of current study, it involves the town is undertaking environmental assessment for the replacement of the bridge. As I've mentioned, the study will satisfy the requirements of the Schedule B Class EA. The study will build on and utilize information from previously completed reports that were developed as part of the Lakeshore Road West Improvements Project. The study will address the requirements of the following phases of the municipal Class EA. So there's a number of different phases that you need to go through to satisfy the requirements of the Class EA. The first is problem and/or opportunity. So we'll, as I've mentioned, we'll present to you a problem, opportunity, and problem and opportunity statement. We are also looking at alternative solutions, and so the study is looking at an inventory of natural, socioeconomic, and cultural environments, identifying and evaluating alternative solutions, consulting with public, Indigenous nations, government review agencies, and key stakeholders, selection of a preferred solution, and preparation of a project file report. So following completion of the two phases, the project will proceed to detailed design, and additional technical work will be completed during the detailed design phase to support development of the detailed design. So anything that needs to be updated at that time will be reviewed and further updated based on current conditions. So work completed to date for the McCraney Creek Bridge replacement includes, under the Class EA for Lakeshore Road, includes natural environmental assessments, fluvial geomorphology and channel design, Stage 1 archaeological assessment, cultural heritage report, and stormwater management. In addition, there was public consultation that was held, so there were 3 PICs, stakeholder meetings, and on-site resident meetings. So all of these, of course, were completed for the broader study, the broader Lakeshore study. However, they did include components for the McCraney Creek structure. Similarly, for agency consultation, meetings were held with Conservation Halton in 2017 and 2018. These also included a review of alternatives for McCraney Creek. And we consulted with Indigenous nations. So we circulated notifications. We met with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are additional technical investigations that were completed, notably the flood mitigation opportunities study for 14 Mile Creek and McCraney Creek systems, Town of Oakville's creek inventory and assessment studies, and structure inspection, which was done independently of this study as recently as 2021. So a little bit more information here. There's on the top right, you can see the key plan, which locates the McCraney Creek Bridge on Lakeshore Road, just east of 4th Line and west of Whittington Place. It carries McCraney Creek. The bridge structure carries McCraney Creek, which flows into Lake Ontario, south from Lakeshore Road West. It accommodates 2 lanes of traffic, obviously eastbound and westbound. There's a sidewalk on the south side of the bridge. There's also a sidewalk just beyond the limits of the bridge structure, so to the west on the north side of the bridge. So with respect to the McCraney Creek Bridge structure itself, it's a concrete arch structure built over 80 years ago in 1940. It was subsequently extended with a box culvert section. So you see the original arch on the left, the box culvert extension on the right. Width of the culvert structure is 5.4 meters. So those 2 photographs just show the conditions on the north side and the south side. Okay, so yes. So there was emergency repair works completed as well in 2017. So in 2017, the northwest supporting wall of the bridge collapsed as a result of severe erosion, an ongoing problem. So emergency repair works were completed to temporarily stabilize the slope. The collapsed wing wall, along with armor stone, were used as temporary support for the slope. So some figures there which show both the pre-existing conditions with the failure as well as some of the emergency repairs that were completed. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Mir Telpur to take the next 10 slides or so, and then I'll come back to wrap it up.
Thanks, David. Good evening, everyone. I will now be going through two sections of this presentation. One section being looking at the existing conditions at the site of this McCraney Creek Bridge, and I'll also be going over the alternative solutions that we have identified and evaluated. So we will start with looking at the bigger picture, bird eye view at a watershed level. On the screen on the right side, you see a map which shows the location of the McCraney Creek Bridge in relation to the watersheds within the jurisdiction of Conservation Halton. So McCraney Creek Bridge, McCraney Creek itself, it's one of the urban creek watersheds within the jurisdiction of Conservation Halton. The creek, it starts from the northern part of the town, so somewhere closer to Highway 407 ETR and Bronte Road, and it flows downwards through the urban areas and discharges into Lake Ontario. When the creek originates in its headwaters, it takes a form of the natural channels and swells, but when it works its way through downstream, it goes through urban areas where there is um, uh, severe alteration to the creek, and it gets contributions from stormwater sewers. Um, in terms of the fish community, the creek, the entire McCraney Creek, it encompasses a total of 9 fish species that have been identified through previous sampling exercises that were completed by the Conservation Halton and Ministry of the Natural Resources and Forestry. As part of this study, we are going to ask for requests for more updated information to see if the agencies has new information to supplement what we know so far. In terms of aquatic species at risk, the federal species at risk mapping indicates that there are no aquatic species at risk at this creek. In terms of the watershed health, the Conservation Halton completed a study back in 2009, which identified that this McCraney Creek is one of the least healthy watercourses within Conservation Halton's jurisdiction. Typically, the organisms or the aquatic worms identified in the creek, they are typically from the areas that contain organic pollution. So now we are going to narrow down our existing conditions overview to the site of McCraney Creek Bridge. We will start with fluvial geomorphology. So fluvial geomorphology is basically the study of the form, shape, and function of streams, creeks, and rivers, and their effects or interaction with the landscape. So the McCraney Creek, in the vicinity of the crossing over the or under the Lakeshore Road, it comes downstream of Rebecca Street, as you can see in the figure on the right side, the aerial view. But when it approaches the Lakeshore Road West, it takes a sharp turn. And because of this reason, it causes severe erosion and ongoing potential for severe erosion on the bridge structure, its walls, embankments, slopes. So that's the main reason that's triggering the ongoing erosion. This has been proven through towns creek inventory and assessment studies that have been completed since 2010. So there has been 3 studies completed that have identified this ongoing issue and which have recommended channel realignment to address this issue. So a channel realignment will basically help orient the flows of water from the creek in a way that pass through the crossing at an angle which reduce the stress on the bridge structure as well as its embankments and the walls that you see on the side. Moving forward, we'll now look at the aquatic ecosystem, so fish and fish habitats. We completed the study back in 2018, which identified at this specific location various barriers to fish passage. So one being at the Rebecca Street, as you can see on the photograph one on the right side, you can see there's a vertical drop which presents a barrier to fish passage. The other one being on the McCraney Creek bridge crossing. You can see on the right side, photograph second, so that exposed limestone, it sort of presents as a slab which poses barrier to fish passage in certain conditions. So there are certain enhancement opportunities there in order to improve both the fish passage as well as the fish habitat. That would include naturalizing the creek bed under the crossing to improve the fish passage, incorporating natural channel design to improve bank stability and create flow morphology and diversity, and incorporate vegetation into the channels, edges, and banks, and also enhance the riparian vegetation. So the creek realignment is not only beneficial from a geomorphological perspective, but it's also connected with fish and fish habitat, and it also helps enhance that environment. So now we will look at the terrestrial ecosystem. So terrestrial means anything land related. The creek, McCraney Creek, downstream of Rebecca Street, it flows through a woodlot, and that woodlot is primarily dominated by the trees, which are invasive plant species, Norway maple, with some species which are native, such as black walnut and willow species. And our investigations also identified that the vegetation and the trees, they are disturbed, and there are signs of flooding that are causing erosion to the roots of the trees and vegetation. Our investigations also identified that there are some trees along in this woodlot that may provide potential for suitable maternity roost sites for some of the species at risk bats. There are some opportunities to enhance the terrestrial environment. So, for example, planting native species, native vegetation, as well as native trees to improve the terrestrial habitat in this area. So from a drainage and stormwater management perspective, as I mentioned before, the creek, where it passes through the urban areas, it receives discharges from storm sewers. At this site, at the subject site over Lakeshore Road, there are two storm sewers that discharge into the creek, one from the east side and one from the west side. You can see the location of those storm sewers on the map on the right side. The storm sewer that is located on the east side is about 600 millimeter diameter, and the one on the west side is about 375 to 525 millimeter. The photograph that you see on the left side on the bottom of the screen, that's an example of the storm outfall, and that's located on the west bank of the creek, north of or west of the Lakeshore Road West. In terms of flooding hazards, so the McCraney Creek Bridge, it's located within an area that's categorized by Conservation Halton as a floodplain hazard and approximate regulatory limit. So those areas, they are regulated by Conservation Halton. The modeling completed as part of this for this crossing indicates that the crossing can convey flood flows associated with a 100-year storm event. However, if there was an event which could be categorized as regional storm or Hurricane Hazel, there would be overtopping across Lakeshore Road, and that would be about 1.40 meters. That could impact the ability of emergency vehicles to safely use the Lakeshore Road in emergency scenarios. The town is undertaking a flood mitigation opportunity studies for 14-mile creek and McCraney Creek systems. That study is recommending a wider structure at this location in order to address the flooding or the risk of the flooding for upstream properties and infrastructure. From a cultural environment perspective, the map on the left side, bottom left side, it shows the cultural heritage property, either designated, listed, or properties on that map in relation to the location of the McCraney Creek Bridge. In addition, town of Oakville, like other municipalities in Ontario, has a heritage register which identifies properties that have cultural heritage value or interest. So the register that managed by the town. It includes various properties as well as bridges. McCraney Creek Bridge is not listed on one of those properties, indicating that it does not have potential for cultural heritage value or interest. In terms of archaeological resources, previous study indicate that there is low archaeological potential due to past disturbance in this area. So this information, through this information, existing condition, it has provided us with constraints, opportunities, and challenges that exist, and what are the processes that are impacting the bridge. So we have identified 3 problem areas that we could address with this environmental assessment study. One being the structural deficiency. As we explained in the photographs, in previous slides, we have photographed that the structure underwent some emergency repairs back in 2017. Those repairs could be considered as a bandage, that they are just temporary in nature. A more long-term solution is required for the bridge structure itself. The problem area being there is a continuous erosion hazard on the bridge structure and on the roadway due to the alignment of the creek, which could be addressed via a creek realignment, which have been recommended through past studies. And the third problem area 3 being flood hazard, as we explained that there is a risk for flooding due to the sizing of the bridge structure, and a wider structure, larger structure could help address that. So in order to support our problem and opportunity statement, the town of Oakville is undertaking this environmental assessment to identify a solution to address the structural deficiency, ongoing erosion, and flood risk at this bridge location. Now, we thought about how we can address these problem areas. We could leave it as is, do nothing. We could come up with the option where we just replace the bridge and leave the creek alignment as is. The third option being we could replace the bridge. We could also realign the creek. And the fourth option being we could replace the bridge, realign the creek. However, we could also orientate the new structure in a way that it aligns well with the new creek, realigned creek. So we took those options and we evaluated them. Again, this work was completed as part of the Lakeshore Roadway study, as well as reviewed by and updated as part of the current ongoing study, as well as shared with the Conservation Halton for review and comment. So we evaluated all those options. The information you see on this slide, I won't be going through through this table because, as you can see, there's quite detailed information. There is a more detailed version of this table available on the project webpage. We invite you to review that. I will provide a summary of our evaluation. If we were to leave the bridge as is, do nothing scenario, it will continue to pose a flooding risk. The erosion problem will remain unaddressed. The erosion could significantly damage the bridge structure, which could also pose a risk to public's health and safety. Bridge replacement option as is, no realignment of the creek. That could address the flooding problem, but it will not address the ongoing erosion risk on the bridge structure and the embankments. So that those 2 options got screened out. We were left with 2 options: bridge replacement with creek alignment, and bridge replacement as well as creek alignment and slightly adjusting the creek, slightly adjusting the bridge structure to align well with the creek realignment. So out of those, our evaluation indicated that the option 4 is the recommended solution because it will address the erosion issue It will address the flooding issue, and it will align well with the new realigned creek, and it would avoid further erosion risk on this structure. So this is the summary of detailed evaluation. We invite you to again review the evaluation table that's available on the project webpage, and provide any comments, any thoughts, any questions you may have. I will now pass on to David. He will go over the proposed bridge design and creek realignment design. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mir. So this figure is split into two parts. The left side shows some details of the bridge structure itself, and the right shows the plan view, which shows the roadway with the bridge structure, as well as a profile of the bridge structure across the roadway. So starting on the top left, you can see the culvert arch bridge design. These are precast segments which are placed on cast-in-place footings, and you can see that there's a low-flow channel that's developed in the center of the culvert. The middle of the left bank of details there shows the retaining wall and the elevation on the west side, or north side, I guess, more properly. And the figure below that shows the south side elevation. So you can see that there's a segmental block wall which is constructed to support the embankment. There's a railing on the top which will prevent mitigate the hazard of the drop-off. The alignment of the wall follows the alignment that's shown in the figure on the right. So if you look at the figure on the right, it shows on the top right, it shows a plan of the culvert, which shows the slight deviation on the north side, which Mir had been talking about, the slight deviation to match the alignment of the watercourse. And the road itself matches the existing roadway, so there's curb and gutter and sidewalk on the south side, which matches the location of the curb and gutter and sidewalk. On the north side, at present, there is no curb and gutter and no sidewalk. We're suggesting that curb and gutter would go at the existing edge of pavement, and that if feasible, if desired in the future, that the sidewalk which exists just a very short distance to the west could actually be extended across the structure. And the bottom right shows a profile of the structure across the roadway itself. So that shows two 3.5-meter lanes, a shoulder on either side, which matches the shoulder which exists today, guide rail, curb and gutter, and sidewalk on both sides, as well as the railing at the retaining wall location. So in terms of the proposed channel design, Mir was talking about the geomorphology approach to this project, and you can see from the figure shown that there is some creek realignment work that needs to be completed. Channel realignment has been designed based on geomorphological principles. The key features and benefits include optimal channel orientation to align with the proposed bridge structure, to eliminate contact with the slope, but also to function in a natural way in accordance with geomorphological principles. A pool to riffle pattern to provide consistent bed form sequence in the creek. Vegetated stone revetments along outside pool banks to protect vegetated roots from potential impacts of high creek flows. Removal of the bedrock barrier in the crossing, which Mir mentioned, to improve fish passage. So stone treatments would promote wildlife movement. You can see that from the figure shown here that there's extensive plantings associated with that to stabilize the watercourse over the long term. So in addition, the project has considered climate change considerations. So Oakville's climate change primer provides information to residents on climate change and how to protect human health and natural environment, residential homes and properties against the impacts of changing climate. For building resiliency, the document refers to the town's climate change strategy. There are a number of aspects of this project that will advance the town's adaptation actions related to the following impacts of climate change. So the first is the objective for creeks and channels to meet or exceed existing capacity during extreme precipitation events. So that's certainly been a design component of this project. Extreme weather will still result in increased natural debris, fallen trees, sediment, and branches entering creeks and channels. So this design would be resilient against those sorts of possibilities. Warmer, shallower water will threaten sensitive aquatic species and habitats. So the design of the watercourse maximizes the low flow channels to the degree possible to provide low flow water, presence of low flow or water in the low flow conditions. Transportation infrastructure is subject to flooding due to extreme and longer duration, so certainly this project protects against a potential risk and mitigates the potential risk of flooding of transportation facilities. And flooding could result from an increase in the frequency, intensity, and duration of extreme weather events. This project takes that into account as well. Next steps. So the intent is for the EA to be finalized by the end of 2022. The study team will complete the following next steps: review comments received as a result of the PIC, prepare a project file report, which will document all the various components and subject areas of the study, and issue a notice of public study completion. That'll be published for in advising the public of the availability of the project file report for review. And then the next phase would be to proceed to detailed design. The timelines are not known at this point in time. That's still to be determined by the town. However, it would involve a detailed design for the bridge replacement and the creek realignment. It will also include additional technical investigations. So we realize that with the passage of time and the further passage of time that we anticipate in terms of from the end of this study, the commencement and the completion of the detailed design, that will be a need to update some of the studies that have been completed. So this will include terrestrial and aquatic investigations, geotechnical, detailed geomorphological design, and a stage 1 archaeological assessment. A tree preservation and replacement plan and landscaping plan will be prepared with the objective to protect and also to enhance vegetation on site. And there will be additional consultations. So with regulatory agencies, permitting will be required, so we'll proceed through permitting process. Agencies include Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation of Parks, Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resource and Forestry, and Conservation Halton. So with that, we come to the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening through so far. And there's an opportunity now to present questions to the study team, and one of us will be able to answer those questions for you.
So thank you, David. With this end of presentation, we see that we are in the next phase of today's meeting, which is the question and answer session. For that, I see the first question from Melanie Rose, and I can read out that question. This creek is not considered to be a healthy watercourse. If efforts are made to improve fish passage and riparian vegetation is enhanced or improved, could this stream be suitable as habitat to endangered aquatic species such as the red-side dace?
Well, I'm going to defer that one to Mir and perhaps Steve. Certainly, the improvements that we're proposing are anticipated to, and the objective is to improve fish habitat. Whether or not it would be appropriate for red-side dace or other endangered species, I'm not sure. But Mir, perhaps you can take that one.
Thanks for the question. So to provide a response to your question, so there is a federal online mapping that provides information about which species at risk, aquatic species such as fishes, could exist at a specific location. We have checked that mapping. It indicates that none of the aquatic species at risk exist at this location, at this creek. Um, this could also be confirmed with the information or the fish sampling completed via the past studies, uh, uh, which did not identify any species at risk fisheries or other aquatic species at this creek. Um, Having said that, if I understand your question correctly, that could aquatic species at risk be introduced at this location? We could not transfer them at this location if it's their migration patterns and all that. So if it's located at a specific location, our effort would be to improve that fish habitat, fish passage, which we are doing in this project. But yeah, simple response to your question is that we did not identify any species at risk fisheries in this creek.
Okay, thank you, Veer. So with this, we have a second question from Mr. Frank Snyder. The question is that looks like you have done an extensive and good assessment with both traffic. Will both traffic lanes be closed during construction, and how long would the construction take?
So the intention, thank you for your question, Frank. The intention is to stage construction in such a way that a single lane of traffic is maintained at all times. This does pose some complexities and some, given the proximity of the culvert structure to the intersection at Fourth Line. However, we believe that with interconnection of the signals, this is possible. So the intention would be for a single lane of traffic in each direction, but alternating with on-site signals. So stage construction. So it'll be alternating traffic. The duration of the construction will be limited to the degree possible through special provisions to the contractor. So we'll try to minimize the disruption to traffic by specifying in the contract a reasonable limitation on the duration of construction. We would expect that construction would be in the order of 2.5 to 3 months. So there will be construction activities occurring for a period of time. However, during some of that period of time, there would be 2 lanes of traffic open. So some of the restoration work that would be occurring at a later date could be completed. Some of the creek work could be completed while traffic lanes are fully open.
Thank you, David. Yeah. So I don't see any other question. So still we have time, and okay. I don't see any other questions. I see that few hands. Okay, yeah. Okay, now, okay. So we have got the third question for this evening. What about any new traffic lights required?
Right. So as mentioned, there will be temporary traffic signals. I hope I made this clear, but there will need to be temporary traffic signals installed associated with the 1 lane of traffic, which will be permitted to proceed alternatively or alternately through the construction site. So this will be required for the phased construction of the culvert. There's no intention at this point in time to make any modifications to the Fourth Line signals. But there will be a need to coordinate the design of the signals, the temporary signals through the construction zone with the signals at fourth line.
So we have fourth question, and again from Mr. MacArthur. Will these be temporarily required only? I think
sorry, I missed that.
So I think he's talking about the traffic lights. That will they be temporary only?
So the signals required for the culvert itself will be temporary. They'll be there for the duration of the stage construction. So the construction will occur in two stages, the north side and then the south side are the opposite way. So that'll be temporary. The signals at fourth line, of course, are there today and will continue to exist in the future.
Thank you. Okay, now we have another question from Melanie Rose. It says that it appears that the creek realignment will move the channel closer to a residence on Lakeshore Road, northwest side of the creek. Have considerations been made reference flood risk to this property?
That's probably a question for Steve.
So as part of the assessment for the crossing, a hydraulic analysis has been conducted. The flood risk with the improved crossing, which is approximately 3 times the size of the existing crossing, will reduce the flood risk for all storm events upstream of the crossing. As far as the channel location and the potential concern of a channel shifting, there are ways of building the channels to ensure that it has limited movability, you would say, within the ravine itself. So that would reduce risk to property from it moving, and it would reduce risk of flooding due to the structure size.
Thank you. Sorry, just to get another message from Melanie Rose that actually she was concerned about the northeast side of the creek. So she corrected herself that it's not northwest, it's northeast side of the creek.
Yeah, I think that would stay, the answer would stay the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer would stay the same. The flood risk within the ravine on either side of the creek would be reduced based upon the structure basically increasing 3 times in size. So whether it's the west or the east side, it would be an improved situation.
Thank you, Steve. So actually one question has been asked from our Madam Pamela Knight that I have a few questions. Is it possible to access the camera? I think the answer is that the format of today's meeting is only through the typing, so that's only possible for the meeting attendees, that they can only type the question and then we can answer the questions through the panel we're sitting here. So please feel free to type your questions and we'll be glad to direct you to the right person in order to answer a question. So while we give some time to Pamela to type her question, I've got another question from Michelle that do you have a sense of when the traffic impact on Lake Shore will occur? Probably traffic impact from the construction.
There'd be in-stream timing constraints, right, Steve? So it'd be summertime, so July, August, September. So.
Okay. So it will be through the summertime.
Through the summer, yes.
Okay. Thank you. So while we are waiting, if anyone else any comments or any questions, just want to remind that there's an electronic form available at our study website. You can put your questions there. You can provide your comments and send us to the project team. We'll be glad to reply your email or in person. That you will get response to those questions if you post it to the website or send us through the email. Okay. Thank you, Pam. We will wait to see your questions in writing. Okay, next question is from Mary. Can you confirm that at no time will lakeshore traffic be diverted on Suffolk Avenue?
There will be no formal detour, so traffic will be directed to the crossing at Lakeshore Road and required to use that crossing location across the construction site in alternating traffic, so a single lane in one direction and subsequently a single lane in the other direction. So there is no intention to provide a detour route through any of the local subdivision streets.
Right. Thank you, David. So next question is from Emmy. I second that question. I am very concerned about the traffic on Suffolk Avenue.
Yeah, and I understand the concern. Cut-through traffic is always a concern. So some of the things that we can do to minimize that is providing information to residents on the site and the construction and the restrictions to traffic, but also doing what we can to minimize the duration of the construction itself. So looking at ways to ensure that construction is completed as expeditiously as possible to minimize any potential for cut-through traffic. And in the detailed design phase, we'll be looking at a comprehensive traffic staging plan for the site as well.
All right. Thank you, David. Yeah. Okay, we've got a next question of tonight's meeting. Is that what about, it's from Mary, again, what about recreational traffic on Lakeshore during construction? Any restrictions?
For recreational traffic?
That's correct.
So I assume that would be active transportation, so cycling, walking, et cetera. So there will be provisions in the traffic management plan to maintain active transportation through the construction site. That will be included in the traffic management plan.
Okay. Right. Thank you, David. This question is again from Michelle, that does Appleby College have any concern about the construction or accessing their property?
So we're not aware of any concerns expressed by Appleby College at this point in time.
And that's correct. And just want to remind that we have in this meeting a representative from Appleby College. They're present. And if at all they're very concerned, they can or their questions, and we'll be glad to.
Absolutely. We'd be very happy to speak directly with them with respect to any possible questions that they might have with respect to the project. Last question?
I think we can give just a couple of more, maybe
Sure.
if people are still thinking.
Typing a very long question, perhaps.
Maybe typing a long question. And I just want to remind that the recording of this meeting and questions and the answers which are verbally answered at this meeting, they'll be posted on our for the EA website in just a couple of days.
See?
Yeah, I don't see any other questions, so maybe we can give like a few minutes, and if you want to take a seat, and then
Okay.
we don't want you to, since we still have time for the PIC, so yeah. Okay, so now we have a question from Melanie Rose, and reads that, can you provide a description of the dragging process to create the new section of Realign Creek? Do we have an estimate of the trees on site that will be impacted, or will this be better detailed in phase 2?
So I'll answer part 2, which was that we do not have a detailed count of the trees. I mean, what we do know is that the trees that are along the watercourse itself are in many cases threatened through to erosion, bank instability. There are also a number of species which are non-native, which is problematic. The first part of the question, I think, was for you, Steve. Can you just
I can repeat, yeah. Can you please provide a description of the dredging process to create the new section of Realign Creek?
Dredging process, so basically the construction methodology for the creek.
Yeah, so as far as the creek construction is concerned, typically it's done in dry conditions. So the creek has to be temporarily either pumped or sent through a temporary conduit around the section that is being worked on. And fish passage has to be considered at that time as well. And the section of creek then that is now dry can be worked on and excavated, and the substrate and the materials required can be applied to the creek bed and to the creek banks with the vegetation that's required as well. Once the creek is stabilized, the flow will then be returned to that new section of creek, and the old section of a creek that's no longer required will be filled in.
All right. While we wait for any other questions from meeting attendees. Okay, so we have a question actually again from Melanie that, thank you. What is the estimated time that the creek might be dried for this process?
So the work is, I guess, it's twofold. First of all, there's the structure itself, which has to be in place. So while the structure is going on, the creek flow has to be maintained. But as far as the creek realignment is concerned, this is a short section of creek that has to be realigned. So for individual sections of creek to be in a dry, you're talking maybe a week or 2 weeks for that construction to occur. But keep in mind that temporary flow passage has to be provided while that work is ongoing. So that temporary passage could be either through pumping, or it can be through a temporary conduit, such as a small culvert, to allow flow to go from upstream to downstream around the temporary creek works. Okay?
Right, so I don't see any other questions. So I don't see any other questions coming. So if sorry, thank you. I don't see any other questions coming. So if everyone is okay, can we wrap up this meeting now? All right. So thank you very much for attending this meeting tonight, and good night then. Yep. Bye.